Yeah,
Yes.
they're being taught that gender is a person's feeling about being a boy or a girl, neither, both, or another gender, or somewhere in between. I'm sorry, why does a 5-year-old need to be taught that? And why, you know, as someone who would acknowledge that what's taught in schools is up to the government, why shouldn't they oppose that kind of thing?
I think they should
So on
oppose
because
it.
I'm trying to understand, because on the one hand, you're saying what's being taught is kind of crazy and maybe actually deeply damaging and psychologically confusing, but on the other hand, you're saying the measures to try and stop it are illiberal. Now, maybe the answer is we just need a more clearly written bill, as in the case of Florida.
I
But I'm
think what
wondering where you come down on that.
I think structurally, this is the problem we have. We have an educational establishment because we have an elite that is completely captive to a certain ideology that is really not held by the vast majority of ordinary citizens. They control the institutions to such an extent that they have determined these things in curricula and so on. No one bothers to look at this stuff. And parents only found out about it partly during the pandemic and because some of the stuff has leaked and so on. So what do you do when when in fact there isn't, the democratic process is kind of broken down, when this stuff is just being imposed in ways that there wasn't a debate about this? When did we have a legislative discussion about whether we're teaching 3-year-olds whether they're boys or girls or not? When was that actually done? When was the school board meeting about that? A lot of this stuff didn't happen, and now it's being flushed out by school board meetings and people are having input into these things. And you're right, public school curriculum are political things. What I don't like is governments jumping in and picking and choosing books, and I just don't like that abandonment of academic freedom. At the same time, I also worry about how these institutions and unions have been captured by certain ideologies you can't get rid of. This is the right-wing argument that says essentially we're run by an administrative state. It doesn't matter who you put in, this will happen. Like in Britain, the civil service under a Tory government is putting critical race theory, making it mandatory for every single person to be employed by the British government. Under the Tories. Why? Because it's just this educational elite class that determines everything quietly and imposes it on your kids is at work. And they, because they're increasingly bubbled and not listening to most people, don't even realize that they're completely out of step. And they look at you, why are you worried about this? What are you? And you're like, because most normie people would think this is fucking bonkers. And it is, to be honest with you, it is completely inappropriate for kids. And you'll notice in most of the mainstream coverage of this, they never actually include the content. They don't tell you what people are objecting to. So you get this confusion. They're just all a bunch of bigots. Like that whole Taylor Lorenz thing, or whatever you pronounce her name, on Libs of TikTok. I mean, they didn't produce a single piece of quote or video that you could see what Libs of TikTok was putting out there. Now, Libs of
But
TikTok is nut picking, obviously, but nonetheless, there are plenty of nuts out there in the field of high school and primary school education. It seems to attract them in some ways. And I don't think that's appropriate. I just don't. Now,
well, but I think most normal voters, if they heard that their child in kindergarten was being told that they might not be a boy or a girl, and if they feel a little boyish one day, maybe they're actually trans, I think most people would say that is crazy, and I absolutely would support a law getting that out of my kid's school.
well, that's why it passed in Florida. That's why these things are being passed elsewhere. That's why the Democrats will not address the substance of it. They will just talk about this in terms of right-wing reaction and anti-gay stuff and all the rest of it. They'll just send out tribal signals without actually engaging the substance. And we don't have to teach kids about this at all. Let them be. Teach them fucking colors and shapes and math, let this be. And this is quite esoteric. It isn't even birds and bees. This is before they ever find out our reproductive strategies as a species.
Right.
They're being told they can invent whether they're a girl or a boy.